Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon. More than I expected on this beautiful fall day, because everybody wants to be outside, right? So it's fun to be inside and share some things about art together. For those of you we don't know each other yet, my name is Matt Adams. I'm very pleased and honored to have worked with Gabriella on this exhibit in the role of juror. She did everything else. I had the easy job, I had the fun job, and I appreciate that opportunity. And as part of that, we had the opening reception last week, and now we're doing a Juror's Talk. And the purpose of this is to try to contextualize and share with you what's going on in my head as I look at the submissions and then make selections, much less the awards. I think that's a fun conversation to have in any kind of format. So this is a little more formal than I usually do, but that's good. So the way I decided to do this is to spend 15-20 minutes talking about Florence. Because no one knows enough about Florence, in my opinion. Everyone needs to know more. And as a self-taught student of the Renaissance, I'm very happy to share with you, frankly, my excitement, my passion for the subject, of which I still read every day. I'm reading something about Florence. Right now I'm reading a book on economical history of Florence. Because in my collection, we've got political history, religious history, economic history, art history. That's just one part of the entire concept that is the Renaissance. And so that's what I want to delve into a little bit more. So of course, going to talk about art, but a little bit more. So let's get started. So these are 6 points that I'm going to go through. First, from Florence, things that came out of Florence for the first time. Going to talk about the guild system because that informs so much of all the different history components of Florence. What caused the Renaissance? So as an American in this time period, I'm really interested, why did the Renaissance happen at all? That leads to, got to talk about humanism for a little bit. Why did the Renaissance happen in Florence in particular? And then I'm going to talk about architecture, sculpture, and painting of the Renaissance. All of this is only 16 of 91 slides of my overall presentation on Florence, which takes 4, 5, or 6 hours. So I'm offering, if someone wants to delve more into this, we can. This is a glossy overview at best. So just know, if you want to talk further, one-on-one, or if you want to get together with groups, by all means, I'm game, I'm ready to go. So with that said, let's jump to the first from Florence. And this list is compiled from all of my studies over the years. No. Going to start with the sector of business and banking. So out of Florence came the income tax system with deductions. So depending on how much land you own, you're taxed at a certain amount. Your income is taxed at a certain amount, and your capital is taxed at a certain amount. That idea that we live with today, that came from Florence. Double entry bookkeeping, for all the accounting nerds who know what that means. All the accounting in today's world is based on double entry bookkeeping. That came from Florence. The personal check came from Florence. The first currency accepted across Europe, so this was 1265, this is the Florentine florin, was the first internationally recognized coinage. Next. Then in the lifestyle section, the modern Italian language, if you can appreciate back when all villages had their own language. These are dialects, local dialects. There came to be one primary, and it was the Tuscan dialect out of Florence that was adopted to be the official language of the country. The public library came out of Florence. The orphanage came out of Florence. Next. Art, good big list, right? You were waiting for that. The opera, piano, art academy, the first art history book, the first artist biography. Perspective drawing was perfected in Florence. The first sculpture in the round came out of Florence. Squashed relief, the squashed relief medium. Thank you, Donatello. Copperplate engraving for all the interested print people. And the modern idea of art collecting, where a collector buys something from an artist strictly to enjoy in their home. That came about because many different effects, but it did come about. Next. And finally, in the government section, I've grouped the patent. The first technical patent came out of Florence. The first municipal bonds, the idea of a shared municipal debt, came out of Florence. And finally, the first building built specifically to be a government office building. We can back up to 1110, and we can talk about the beginnings of the Bargello, but that began as homes that were then clumped together to be office buildings. But then we talk about the Uffizi, that was built specifically to be a governmental building. All these things, the first came out of Florence. Did you know any of these? I'm curious. Which one did you know?
I knew about the orphanage, the public library, and the art collecting.
Because you've been there.
You told me last week.
So, you know, digging into Florentine history and uncovering these facts has captivated me. Absolutely captivated me. We are here living the life we're living today because of the Renaissance. We can also talk about Christopher Columbus and Amerigo Vespucci and the discovery of the New World. That happened because of Florence. That's a sidebar I'm not going to get into right now. But trust me, you're sitting here right now because of the Florentine Renaissance. Next. Have to mention the guilds. So the guilds in Florence, there were major guilds and minor guilds. The minor guilds shifted over time. But in general, I want you to realize that this class of the population is what ruled Florence. The major guilds, first of all, major guilds. We had judges and notaries, which today notaries are still in Italy. They're lawyers, but they're different than notaries. Refiners of imported fabrics, particularly wool and silk, had their own guild. Then the wool merchants had a guild. Bankers was one of the major guilds. Silk weavers and the merchants of silk was their own guild. Doctors and physicians and apothecaries were a guild, and furriers. And before you ask, where were artists in this? Artists blended their own paints like an apothecary did. So artists became members of that guild. Furriers was the seventh major guild. Minor guild, butchers, shoemakers, builders, blacksmiths, dealers in secondhand goods. So flea markets, that's not a modern thing at all. They actually had their own guild. Stone and wood workers, carvers, lined drapers and peddlers, armorers and sword makers, and wood trunk makers. All of these guilds had their particular insignia, and you'll see these all around Florence. The guilds made the government happen. Florence is the only city that adopted or kicked out the noble from being part of the government. Only members of the guild were part of city council or the signoria. If you're a member of a guild, you are qualified to hold office. Florence was the city that did that. This was a republic. Now, there was a lot of behind-the-scenes shenanigans happening. Not going to go down that rabbit hole right now. But the general concept was Republican. It was based on the guilds. Next.
Was there a guild for artists?
That was the apothecary. Yeah. So what caused the Renaissance? Next. 1293, what I just said about the guild. The ordinances of justice came about in 1293, and that was the government structure that said noble people are specifically excluded from serving in the seigneuria. Only guild members could serve. Other things were in that law, but that was the big one. 1293, next. In the 1300s, there was a great increase in wealth due to particularly the wool and silk guilds and banking. Huge influx of money. So start forming up a picture in your head. You've got this new governmental model happening in Florence. Then you've got all this money coming in. All right, next. And add to that, in 1378, religious strife, the great schism of the Eastern and Western Orthodox churches. That meeting came to Florence, and what that brought in was very educated religious leaders of these churches, brought all this information into Florence for a few months, where they interacted with the people of Florence, spreading this knowledge that no one had had experience, had exposure to before. Next. 1450s, Lorenzo de' Medici, hence my Jeep, gave artists access to his library and sculpture garden. So his father was a collector, and Lorenzo decided to open up to artists the ability to draw in his sculpture garden, for example. People didn't do that. That just wasn't a thing. But at this time, there was this change in mindset that had been happening. Next. In the realm of humanism. Humanism, defined as a system of thought that focuses on humans and their values, capacities, and worth. Humanism is easily argued, it's easily argued that humanism allowed the Renaissance to happen. Next. So I want to give a couple minutes on humanism. It's that important. Like the guilds, I just want to give you these seeds, right? So this is one of the big seeds I want to leave you with today. The humanist interest primarily was a revival of ancient literature and art and law and science. The humanist activities included, what did these humanists do? Well, they imported artworks, some might say stole in modern terms, acquired various artworks, collect manuscripts or so-called books, collecting this old information, then copying these books, because what do you do when you send someone, an agent, to Greece and they find a manuscript and bring it back to you? You go, oh, hey, you come over and I'm going to hire you to copy it. We also like collecting things, trinkets from the past, in particular gems. And humanists talked to other humanists. They built their own culture, if you will. It's really important to keep in mind that the Christian church and the monasteries, the mendicant orders, that infrastructure was as strong as ever, while at the same time humanism was gaining traction. These were completely overlaid, not one at the expense of another. Interestingly, it democratized the culture in that scholars and patrons and artists shared humanism equally. There weren't classes of people that were associated with humanism. Everyone was welcome to the game. Clergy didn't respond directly, but humanism did have a definite impact on the runnings of the Catholic Church. Again, a rabbit hole for another day. Next. All right, I'm going to do architecture in 3 centuries and 3 slides. Ready for this? Just for an overview. We talk about architecture before 1300, so now there's 4. So before 1300, we have the baptistry, we have San Miniato al Monte, we have Santa Croce, not this facade, that's a 1700s facade. and of course the cathedral. Next, then in the 1300s proper, now we can talk about Palazzo Vecchio, Orse Michele, Giotto's bell tower. So this, you see the dome back here. So the cathedral's here, the baptistry's here, the bell tower. Ponte Vecchio, if you've never been to Florence, you know what even that is, right? And the Loggia de Lanzi. So architecture 1300s followed by architecture 1400s. Here we have San Lorenzo, still with no facade, even to this day. Inside San Lorenzo, we have the old sacristy. Brunelleschi did the old sacristy. Brunelleschi did, this is the front of the orphanage, the Ospedali. We've got his dome. We have his Pazzi Chapel. And I put this here because this is my personal favorite spot in Houston, in Florence to be, is in the Pazzi Chapel. And then we have the Palazzo Medici, 1400s, followed by 1500s. So here we have the government building, the Uffizi. It wraps around here. Two Michelangelo things. We've got his library, the Laurentine Library, that's within the San Marco complex. And we have the so-called new sacristy that he did also in the San Lorenzo complex. There, all of Florence architecture in what, 3 minutes? Again, overview. Yes, ma'am.
I have just it's kind of a trivia question, just sort of starting off. So of all the Medicis that did all this, do they know who their modern families are? Are they still called Medicis? Have they changed their names, or is it now eternally?
The family essentially, for all intent and purposes, has died out.
Okay.
I came across on YouTube a Lorenzo Medici that lives today, and he's an artist and a philanthropist. Great character. He's represented by a talent agency in LA, and they have a web page for him because you can hire him for talks. But in essence, the traditional Medici are long gone. Okay, next. Sculpture. So here's 100 years of sculpture on one slide, just to give you a feel, right? Just to give you a feel. Here we have Donatello's David. So this is the first sculpture in the round since antiquity. We got the contrapposto position, which we're going to see up front. We have Michelangelo's Madonna of the Stairs. We have this Michelozzo Donatello. This is the first memorial of its type, which if you've been to Rome, you've seen bazillions of these. But it was Donatello and Michelozzo that devised that. The first bronze doors, the second bronze doors of the baptistry with Ghiberti. My favorite building in the city is Orse San Michele for many reasons. And the sculptures that are on view in niches on the outside of Orse San Michele were done in the 1400s. Next. Jumping to sculpture of the 1500s. So this is City Hall, Palazzo Vecchio. This is the Loggia de Lanzi. And the sculptures around here are, well, these are some of the sculptures that are around here. So of course we know David, the Bandinelli's, they're right next to each other, all right? So Bandinelli's Hercules and Cacus, really fun story later. Cellini's Perseus and Medusa and Giambologna's Rape of the Sabines, arguably the last sculpture that came out of Florence that was significant and left an impression on history. And if you like a Neptune fountain, frankly, I think it's way too much, but he's out here. So the sculpture of the 1500s, you can really just go to Piazza Signoria and check out the sculptures. Oh, okay. And then that's the end of sculpture in Florence. Next. Now let's shift now to painting. And to go before 1300s, you have to start somewhere. Okay, let's just start here. A big shift was Middle Ages, early Gothic, what we saw was a Christ with his head up, having a good time being crucified. Huge change. He's looking down and he's in pain. That was a huge change. And then we can talk about, these are in the Uffizi, these giant panels, these altarpieces. Very flat, right? The gold background because heaven is gold. Everyone has their halos. None of the perspective makes sense, but they're all angels and they're saints and they're all these wonderful people that deserve our veneration, and they get it, regardless of how they're depicted. Then, jump up to the 1300s, and there was the beginnings of, oh, maybe we can make things a little better, but still, it's a lot of gold backgrounds, which imagine candles under these altarpieces with this gold and how that would flicker during a service. Yeah, beautiful, right? But we still see a lot of flat figures, and this is all religious painting. I mean, we're not seeing secular painting yet. Next. When we get to the 1400s, okay, well, things have really ramped up. Let's talk about perspective. Let's talk about realistic rendering of faces, of human forms, of fabrics, more realistic colors. And these are just my favorites of the 1400s. And you can disagree with me all day, and that's fine. I love those conversations. But these are my 5 favorite paintings of the 1400s. So that's a homework assignment. Come up with yours, and then let's compare notes. Boccaccio's tribute money is generally regarded as the seminal beginnings of the Renaissance in use of perspective, in use of rendering. Michelangelo, artists would come from all over Italy and sketch in this chapel of this painting and the others in that chapel. This I just adore. It's often overlooked in the, I love this. Ghirlandaio's my personal favorite painter of the late 1400s, but Botticelli's Calmuny. See? Yeah. If I could steal something out of the Uffizi, it would be that. Next. Then paintings of the 1500s. We're going to start with Michelangelo, but he was done. And then we get to Mannerism, following, we're going to talk art history terms. We go from Renaissance into Mannerism, and then Baroque, and etc. This is the inside of the dome, the fresco inside the dome that Vasari began. That's the project he was working on when he died, the largest fresco in the world. We go to Andrea del Sarto, who just had another room open in the Uffizi last week. Another one. And Bronzino's Chapel of Eleonora de Toledo in the Palazzo Vecchio. So we see, in general, century to century, shifts in style. And so I just want to give you a real fast overview on that. Next. That's the end. How are we doing on time? Okay, because that's half of what I wanted to do. Now we're going to go to the front. So now that hopefully you got some things rattling around in your head, let's look at the artwork that I had the opportunity to choose for this, and let's go around the room. So shift rooms. Another thing that the ordinances of justice did was required all the towers in Florence to be truncated to 93 feet. So families, rich families and nobles, they had a tower. And they existed in their tower because they're not going to be down there with the plebeians and fighting and all that stuff. No, we're going to be up in towers. So when I saw this, I went up in a tower, because I'm a nobleman. I went up in my tower and I looked down at the people below. And that's what I saw in this. And that's why that's here. It reflects a view that only the nobles had until 1293. This piece, a Madonna and Child. Well, I wanted a Madonna and Child in this show, and that's the Madonna and Child we got. And it's here because we had to. And I love, Jesus was Caucasian, right? We can all agree that's historically correct, right? Of course. So I love that this artist kept in that tradition, that error, and then put blonde hair on baby Jesus even more. Even got rid of the dark hair. I'm like, okay, I can get on board with this. So the drawing, it's very much of a drawing, so please feel free to get up in front of that one. The narrative shown in this piece is very indicative of the kinds of non-religious narratives that we see happening in Florence in the particularly the 1500s, but in the 1400s. So going back and telling these ancient Greek stories in painting, I think is very important to contextualize the entire exhibit. And I'm going to jump because it's the same artist did the yellow one over here. And I gave this one actually second prize. So the reclining male nude, and the reclining nude was very much a Renaissance thing. And so this kind of checked that box. But then she put this shock of like neon hair on him. Like, okay, we can make this modern. And then these marks back here, these deliberate marks, but they're not necessarily telling us anything, they're just decorative. Art can be decorative. It doesn't have to be all about Jesus and crucifix and all these heavy religious things. It doesn't have to be all about these mythological things. We got him laying here. Sometimes it can be an area of just, ooh, it's pretty. I'm just going to go around because I think that's the easiest thing. So here's a figurative with geometry. It links to, the concept-wise, that one and the embossed paper one too. We talk about perfection. Brunelleschi's architecture. What he brought, after studying architecture in Rome, what he brought was a sensibility of structure, of repeating pattern, multiples and fractions of the unit into architecture. And we can talk about those architecture things. But that's the basis of the Renaissance architecture was what I just said. So what I like about this is this artist, he's considering structure and then juxtaposed with a figure. I'm like, okay, check that box, check that box. This artist is choosing to, so these dreadlocks we immediately read as African American. The ruffle collar, the halo-like arch, wait, what is going on here? Okay, you got me. Right, you got me here. So we have an African in general in nice dress looking away from us. This is very opposite, but on the nose of so many portraits we see, Renaissance era portraits. So I just love this piece. This piece looks like, it's a gesso, but it looks like a carved relief. Let's look at Orsi and McKelly. They're not really reliefs though, but the prevalence of carved reliefs in Florence is everywhere, right? Then we can talk about the bell tower for sure, because there are lots of carved reliefs. And so I wanted that as contextualizing in the show. Similar to what I was saying over here about architecture, this artist is considering structure. They're considering color, but in particular structure. So is this about perspective? Is this about architecture? Is this about design? Well, it's kind of about all of those things. So I appreciated that. This sculpture, here's a unit, here's a unit, here's a unit. Let's talk about Giotto's bell tower. 3 architect, builder, designers worked on that bell tower. And the next time you look at that bell tower, I bet, now that I told you that, you can see 1, 2, 3. So this is reflecting that, but it's only one person that did it. So I really don't think this artist was intending that, but it's like the big piece over here. You know, I'm reading history into these works. But the rendering of this with the figure and the architectural element and then a decorative vase, just going to throw those things together in one piece. It's a lot going on. Love it. These two small collages, I mean, you're going to put a picture of David here. All right, you got my attention. All right. But what are you doing with that? Right? What are you doing with that? Well, I'm going to put these big giant feet on it, messing with the proportions of the human form. Even if, when you see it in person, it's even more so. You look at it, the proportions aren't right on Michelangelo's David. They're just not. We can talk about that, but that'll be later. So that this artist puts in these big giant feet, I'm like, okay, you got me. It's kind of like the Jesus here with the blonde hair. I mean, I'm going to take these things that are not perfection, and I'm just going to force it down your throat. But the use of line and color, there's structure here, similar to, right? So this artist is considering structure also. So you see, I'm looking for multiple boxes I can check, right, on each piece. This is very drawing-like, sketchbook-like. And then we can talk about the history of the artist's sketchbook, the medium of drawing, papers, inks, processes, scale, front, back, reuse of, all of this, for me, is thrown into here. Checking off those boxes. This one, again, this is about architecture. This is about structure. And there's a subtlety here because it's monochromatic. I mean, you can still kind of see it, but the closer you're like, oh, okay. And look at what this artist is doing. Right. Jumping or continuing around the room, here's a portrait that is flat, evocative. This use of imperfection is something that artists today are still trying to do. It hasn't gone away. So here we have someone in presumably a nice outfit because the whole outfit's being shown, right? Most portraits are, bust because you're not wearing really something nice. So this is someone who's got a great wardrobe and is being featured in this portrait, but it's just not rendered out. Like the opposite of what I'm talking about, structure over there, this complete lack of structure hit me. And it hit me at the, in the right way at the right time. Here we have a bronze, figurative sculpture. All right, medium-wise, gotta have it. Then we can talk about the stance, the contrapposto. This was a Renaissance thing. Go back to ancient statuary and we stand like a tree. Very unnatural stance. People don't do this. People stand like this. So we see the contrapposto all over Renaissance art. We can go back, to David if we want to. So this is reflecting a modern take of these Renaissance era concepts and ideas of beauty. Behind, oh, we got a mosaic. Oh, be still my heart. We have mosaic, which in Florence, how many mosaics are there? Right? We go to Ravenna, wow, it's everywhere. Florence is not really known for mosaic, but mosaic is there. And this artist is taking a fraction of what? Not Medusa. What is this a fraction of? Not what? Who? What about Venus? Birth of Venus. Birth of Venus. And this is a fraction of, so using the mosaic, this ancient art form, today, okay, you got me, and I'm going to take just the oversized hand, right? Because that David's right hand is not in proportion with his body, and that's all I'm going to feature in this piece. And you've seen the birth of Venus, and her neck is just wrong. Her neck is wrong. And it's like, okay, here's Venus's. I'm like, okay, you got me. Then we get the three Davids. So this, I put third place on. Contemporary, so we got the three Davids. We've got the 17-foot tall Michelangelo's David is the shortest one, which, see, it's funny. Bernini's David, right, that's in Rome at the Borghese, and he's 12 foot?
He's slightly larger than mine. He's up on his house, so
Yeah.
He's probably slightly larger than mine.
And then we've got Donatello's David, which we just saw, which is 4.5 foot. So this artist, he's taking these three Davids and recontextualizing them in today's Olympics. And he's putting on, so the Medici commissioned this sculpture. He's indicating the historical basis of each of these, putting them in the Italia jackets with their medals. And this modeled background, again, just decorative, it kind of doesn't matter what the background is. Love it. Guess let's do, so this artist, now I'm interested in structure, right? Now you know that about me. You shouldn't be surprised at all. The coloring here, though, is very Fauvist, right? This coloring is kind of whacked out. And of course, well, I say of course, if you need to get your phone and stand back at the wall and look at this through your phone, you see Mona, which was stolen into the Louvre. We're not so he's taking these old Renaissance era subjects and doing this modern twist with them. This piece, this checks a whole another box. What box is that? War. Conflict. I mean, let's talk about the political history of, well, the Italian peninsula in particular. Let's not go up to Europe, but just human conflict. It's not a new idea at all. And this artist, for our eyes, we read this as 9/11 because of what we know in our personal history. But we got tower here, fantastic. It's a note back to the towers. But the demolition that happens here, you read about political history anywhere, but the Italian peninsula, Florence in particular, war and conflict was constant. So this is pulling in that note of reality in the collection of artworks. And finally, no, because we have two on the outside. Yeah, we have two on the outside. So we get to this piece why did I give this first place?
Because it's awesome.
Why is it awesome? The narrative. This is so heavily narrative. Today and 500 years ago. So we have a solid background with a repeating element in that background that means something. There's a significance to it. If you don't know what the significance is, you can tell there's a significance to it because it's repeated, boom, 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 boom. It must mean something. And we have a Christ figure, thank God he's Caucasian, with kind of blonde hair even, giving the benediction, right? So this is a holy subject, very respectful of the religious history that he's representing, that is rendered so well. I mean, the rendering of this figure is top notch, right? Then we've got our three pigs completely opposite in rendering, completely separating themselves visually from the Christ. So there's really some kind of tension between the Christ and these three dancing pigs. Again, you don't have to know what that is, but it's evident that there's tension there. And they're dancing around these burning let's talk about Savonarola and the bonfire at the Vanities. That happened in Florence. So all that history is coming to me. So it's not that I know exactly what's going on here, but then we read the title, which is Texas PTA meeting. Whoa! That's a very modern, right? That's a very, very modern thing. Now you can start to read this just through the title, because titles are important. But at the same time, I see it is reflecting that which has happened before will happen again. Those who don't study history are doomed to repeat it. Hello, Texas education system. So to have such a political kind of note in here, I think elevates everything. And I gave this one first prize. Now, on the front, there are two that face the window. I'm not sure how to do this. It's nice outside. Quick, jump outside.
I love how you're putting history down. That's great.
This is not, but right. The building on top of building on top of building. The medieval tower and the houses of the normal people were very crowded and stacked on top of each other. It was a very dirty place to be. It was noisy, not clean. Historically speaking, just not pretty. And I'm not a pretty painting, but it's history that of life. Window. Well, I'm going to just repeat many of the things I said before about looking for structure, studying structure, and perspective came out. Brunelleschi came across the writings of an optical scientist, and he took the studies of this optical science from the Middle East and adopted those studies into art and developed a way to teach artists to consider perspective. That was a very Renaissance thing. And that might be a good thing to end on, unless someone had, well, I think we're doing good on time, I think.
Yes, 45 minutes.
Okay, so we've covered a lot. There's a lot more to cover. I hope you're stimulated somewhat. If you want to talk later, this is obviously my favorite subject. That door is open, but thank you so much to the artists that are here. Thank you for submitting your work, because I think it made a fantastic show. Gabriella, thank you for producing the show. Yes, yes. It wouldn't happen without her. So with that said, I will come to a close and say good afternoon.
Can we see a show of hands of the artists that are in the show?
Oh, artists that are hanging on the walls.
Mine is this one.
Good idea, thank you.
An uplifting talk. Thank
That's a
you.
good one to end on.